then to 10 of the disciples, and finally to Thomas, good old doubting Thomas. And so when chapter 1 opens, this is a week or two later, after those first appearances of Jesus after the resurrection. So turning your Bibles to chapter 21 of the Gospel of John, or turning your iPad or iPhone or the Bible in the chair rack in front of you. It's on page 1075. And we're going to follow along. I'll put some of the text will be up on the screen, but it'd be nice to follow along. There's also a note outline that you can use in your bulletin. John 21, beginning in verse 1. So after this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, James and John, and 2 others of his disciples were together. And Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as the day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, do you have any fish? They answered him, no. He said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. Sound familiar? The disciple whom Jesus loved, which is probably John, therefore said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. Now what we see here is sort of a warning to those who know and love Jesus. The warning is, don't go back to your old way of life. Now this story does sound a lot like what happened 3 years earlier when Jesus first called Peter to follow him. You might recognize it. Back in that time when Jesus called Peter, follow me and I will make you what? Fisher of men. See, that's what Peter calls him. Instead of being just a fisherman, I will make you a fisher of men. And for 3 years, Peter walked that walk. He saw what it was like. He learned about ministry. He learned who Jesus was and how to do ministry, seeing the Lord do miracles and seeing the Lord use him in the lives of other people. But now things are different. A week before Jesus' death, or just before Jesus' death, he was boasting about his loyalty to Jesus, and yet he denied him 3 times. And at this point, he probably has assumed that Jesus had no more use for him. That's often how we feel after a moral or spiritual failure. So Peter goes back to being just a fisherman. Back to the old way of life, back to life on his own, doing things his way. And while he's fishing, a stranger appears on the shore. The stranger tells them to try casting their net again on the other side of the boat. And what happens? Another miraculous catch of fish. Do they remember the first time? Luke 5, when Peter first met Jesus, Peter's response then was, "Depart from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man." But that's when Jesus told him, "Do not be afraid, for from now on you will be catching men." And they left everything, the nets, the boats, the fish, the fishing, and followed Jesus. They had left all that to follow him. And here in John 21, one of the disciples with Peter remembers all that, remembers that miraculous catch from 3 years earlier, and makes the connection and says, it's got to be the Lord. Who else could do this? Now, as a swimmer, I love verse 7 here. Peter threw himself into the sea. It's this picture I have. If you're ever in a pool without lifeguards, no one's there to tell you it's no running, no running. You get at one side, get a running start, and dive into the pool. It's like flying for about 3 seconds. And then you hit the water, and that's what I think Peter, I see him he throws his robe on, and he just takes a running start and leaps into the water. Yeah, he probably set a record for the 100-yard freestyle here. He abandons the boat, the nets, and the fishing again because he wants to be with Jesus more. I'm going to go on. I'm not going to read verses 9 through 14, but when they do get to the land, Jesus has prepared a breakfast for them, and he invites them to come and eat together. Verse 12, though, if you look at it, is significant. John says, now none of the disciples dared ask him, that's ask Jesus, who are you? It says they knew it was the Lord. They knew. They knew it was Jesus, raised from the dead, alive, eating breakfast with them. They knew who Jesus is. And what comes next? To know Jesus is to love Jesus. Verse 15. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And Peter said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my sheep. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Notice here, 3 times Jesus asked Peter the question, do you love me? And 3 times Jesus tells Peter, feed my sheep, care for my lambs, tend my flock. Jesus is reminding him that your motivation for ministry is love. Now, as a fisherman, Peter probably got used to the smell of fish. In fact, he probably loved the smell of fish. But the smell of sheep? I don't think so. Sheep can be smelly, ornery, self-willed. Sheep can do dumb things at times. And shepherding can be hard work. Long hours, boring at times, and dangerous at times. But Jesus' question is not, do you love sheep? And it's not, do you love shepherding? His question is, do you love me? Your love for Jesus is the only sufficient motivation for living the Christian life or ministry. See, it's not in ministry, do you love public speaking? Do you love to study the Bible? Do you love sharing your faith? The only question that matters is this one. Do you love Jesus? Now notice that the first time Jesus asked the question, he says, do you love me more than these? Now I wish I was there when Jesus asked that question because I'm really, I am so curious, it drives me a little nutty to think, I want to look and say, okay, what was he pointing at? Where was he looking when he said, do you love me more than these? What do you think? What do you suppose he was pointing to when he asked the question? What are the these that he is referring to? Do you love me more than these fish? Do you love me more than you love food to satisfy your hunger or the money, the profits from your fishing business? Is he looking at the boats and the nets? Do you love me more than these? Your possessions? Your fishing career, which brings you a measure of security, success, fulfillment? Or is he looking at the other disciples? Do you love me more than these disciples? Now here it's a little tricky because you could take that a couple of different ways. He could have meant it in an objective sense. Do you love me more than you love these friends? The disciples, your friends, more than you love their approval. Or he could have meant it in a subjective, comparative sense. Do you love me more than you think these people love me? I don't know what Jesus meant. I don't know what he was referring to or pointing to here. And it really doesn't matter. Because anything at all that we love more than him gets in the way. The central question, the only question that matters, do you love me? So why do you think Jesus repeats this question to Peter 3 times? Well, when you think about it, it's probably a reminder to Peter of what happened just a few days earlier when Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Now imagine that you're sitting around the table, your family after dinner, and perhaps it's your spouse if you're married, or if not, imagine your mother or father or someone else there in your family asking you, do you love me? And you're kind of caught off guard and you stammer a quick, well, yes, I love you. And then they ask you again, do you love me? This time you think a bit and try to respond more convincingly. Yes. Yes, I love you. And then they ask the question a third time. Do you love me? And at this point, you either probably explode in some sort of defensive anger. Why do you keep asking me that? I told you on our wedding day, and it stands until I take it back. Or you just collapse in utter defeat, acknowledging your miserable failure to truly love the way you know you should. Remember how Peter boasted just a few days earlier. Now, these other guys, they may fail you, but I will never desert you. In fact, I'm ready to die for you. His biggest boast led to his biggest failure, denying he knew the Lord 3 times. Imagine the shame that he felt. Because all these guys had heard it. All of them had seen him run away. And here he is with them. And Jesus is going to get it all out in the open. Reminding everybody. And so Peter finally responds at the end, Lord, you know. You know it all. You know all things. I can't hide anything from you. You know that he says, you know that I love you. He changes the word. In English, it still means love, but he changes the word to phileo. In essence, he's saying, Lord, you know that I only sort of love you. He uses this different Greek word for love, not the word agape, not the selfless, unconditional love that Jesus has been asking him about here, and he's been trying to claim. Lord, you know all things. So when you fail in ministry or in your walk with the Lord, what do? Because we're all going to fail at times. Do you deny it? Try to hide it, blame someone else? Do you wallow in your failure? Crawl in a hole and pull the cover up overhead? Or do you just quit? Forget it. I told you I wasn't any good at this. I'm going back to fishing. So Peter's coming off his biggest boast and his biggest failure. But Jesus still wants to use him. And so 3 times he says to Peter, feed my sheep. Care for my lambs. Tend my flock. See, Jesus is saying to Peter and to us, don't be discouraged by your failure. Even when you have failed, and failed miserably, Jesus still wants to use you. Failure is not final with Jesus. God is always in the business of redeeming and restoring his people. In fact, often it's through our failure and our brokenness and our experience of God's grace that we're able to minister his grace to others more personally. Because I've received mercy, I'm able to extend mercy. Feed my sheep. Care for my lambs. Tend my flock. Some of you might remember a song by Bob Carlyle quite a few years back called We Fall Down. The song tells a story of a very poor boy who lives outside a monastery. And he wonders what life is like inside the monastery. And one day he meets a monk, and he asks him, what is it like to live? He has all his imagination of what it must be like. And the monk answers him, we fall down, we get up. We fall down, we get up. The saints are just the sinners who fall down and get up. So get up and don't let your failure defeat you or discourage you. Let's go on. Verse 18. Jesus is still speaking to Peter here. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he, that is Peter, was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, follow me. Why does Jesus talk with Peter about his death? I believe it is to reassure Peter, yes, you will die for me someday. See, Peter has denied Jesus because of his fear of death. His boast of loyalty was empty in the face of real danger. And now he doubts his own ability to follow Jesus. And Jesus is reassuring him, yes, someday you will die for me. But for now, I'm calling you to live for me, to follow me. How does Peter respond? Verse 20. This is 20 and following. This is just classic. Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? Again, this is probably John. When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. So the saying spread abroad among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Jesus' point here is don't be distracted by comparison, like Peter is. See, after Peter hears Jesus call him to follow him, which, yes, includes dying a martyr's death, then he spots John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, his favorite. And what does Peter do? He asks Jesus, well, wait a second. What about him? What's your plan for him? Is he going to have to suffer too? Do you love him more than me? See, Peter gets distracted by comparison. Now, if we admit it, we often do the same thing. It can happen to us. Compare our life situation, our calling, our circumstances to another brother or sister. It isn't fair, Lord. Why do I have to go through this? Why do I suffer more than they do? Of course, we only see a small part of the picture of what's going on in another person's life, but that doesn't seem to keep us from comparing our life with theirs. We think we know. Some of you know that I have two brothers, an older brother and a younger brother. And one of them, my younger brother, started out as an engineer with Hewlett-Packard, and he's now a manager for Agilent, one of the spin-offs of Hewlett-Packard. My older brother started a very successful chemical company, and after he took the company public, he was able to retire at 42 as a multimillionaire. Sweet. Yeah, no problem. Do you think I ever get distracted by comparison? Never. Not realistic. Sure. What if I'd used my degree in biomedical engineering from Brown University? Where would I be now? Well, Jesus gives a very simple response to Peter, to me, and to you. What is that to you? What is that to you? What if my plan for him is that he'll live until I come back? What if his path is sweet and easy compared to yours? What is that to you? And then Jesus gives an emphatic, it doesn't come through in the English very well, but an emphatic, you follow me. You. Follow me. Following Jesus is a personal call and a personal decision. You're not called to follow someone else's path, and you aren't following someone else's plan. No matter how easy the lives of those around you may seem by comparison, you follow Jesus. I don't know where each of you are in this discipleship process. I'm willing to guess that some of you are discouraged by failure. In fact, you may even be tempted to go back to your old way of life. And some of you are probably distracted by comparison. What about him? What about her? But Jesus is asking you the same question that he asked Peter. Do you love me? Because to know me is to love me, and to love me is to follow me. Let's pray. Lord, you do know us. You know all about us. As Peter acknowledged, you know all things. You know the times when we have praised you and given ourselves to you and said we would follow, and you know those moments and days and longer when we have just turned and done our thing, gone our way. Yeah, we can say we love you, and yet, Lord, you know at times we're not even sure we like you. But you keep revealing yourself if we are willing. You keep showing us who you are And as we grow to know you, to know all that you are, to know all that you mean, and all that you have done for us, you draw out of us that love for you that is higher and deeper and wider than anything else. And so, Lord, this morning again, we respond and to say, yes, Lord, we love you. We commit ourselves afresh to you, to follow you, to be a part of your plan in the roles that you lead us to and call us to be a part of feeding your sheep, caring for your lambs, tending your flock. And we commit ourselves to not be discouraged by our failures. And when we are distracted by comparison, that you would lead us and help us to let go of that. Because we love you and we want to follow you.